Although a lot of my work focuses on wolf conservation, it's important to keep in mind the ecosystem as a whole. I'm here in Fort Myers Beach, Florida, and some of my favorite plant and animal species live down here, so I'm going to take you along and show you a few of my favorites. What we have here is 3 different types of sea snails found in Florida. This first one is a fighting conch. Now, why they call them fighting conch is because when you pick them up, they'll try and whip you with their tail, and they're not really trying to fight. They're just trying to get back into the water. So if we put him up here on land, he'll start jumping and trying to make his way back into the ocean. Now these guys, like typical snails, are herbivores, so they'll eat algae or seaweed on the bottom, and they can actually move around much faster than most snails because they have that jumping foot. Now behind him here are 2 more snails. This one is a crown conch, and this one is a lightning whelk. Both of these are carnivores, so they're actually going to eat meat. So they'll attack clams, maybe a dead fish, and that helps keep the water clean because they'll help decompose anything that's dead in the water around here. Sometimes these guys are even cannibalistic, so they'll eat other snails or they'll eat their own type. And this guy, this lightning whelk, is interesting because unlike most snails with shells curved to the right, and this one too, this guy's shell curves to the left. And you got to be careful when you're walking around here because they'll actually bury themselves down into the sand, and the only thing that'll be sticking out is this point, and you might accidentally step on it. We're going to let them go, and they'll be on their way. And it's important to keep in mind, if you ever find a shell in Florida and there's something alive in it, put it back in the water, because I used to see way more of them around here, but now it's kind of sparse. So I always try and keep them alive if I can. What I have growing here in a line is mangrove trees. Now these are one of my favorite plants. They grow here and they provide many benefits for the coastline in Florida. Not only do they prevent sand erosion from the beach during hurricanes, they provide a nursing ground for young fish in this shallow water. If we take a look at an individual plant here, we can see some of its interesting aspects. Not only does this plant have regular roots, like you would think of most trees, it also has 2 other specialized roots. If you zoom in, you can see these prop roots growing down from the branches. Now what these prop roots do is help anchor the plant into the sand to prevent waves from washing it away, or a hurricane or a wind from blowing the plant over. And then another type of root it has are these roots grow vertically up from the sand, and what they help the plant do is get more oxygen. And the reason they do this is because this plant grows in really wet and muddy water, and by these roots growing vertically up out of the soil, they help the plant gather more oxygen for its root system. If you take a look at the leaves here, you can see they're really thick, and if we go inside to some of the older branches like this one, we can see some of the leaves are turning yellow. What this plant has to deal with is salt water because it grows by the ocean. So it needs to get rid of the salt because, like any other plant, it needs fresh water. And what it does is it secretes some salt on the bottom and top of its leaves with special glands, and when the rain comes, it'll wash away all the salt from the plant. And so once again, these mangroves are an important part of the ecosystem because a lot of crabs grow and live on the trees. There's all these snails down here, and the roots provide the estuaries, and that's where all the fish live, and the young fish can find shelter in all these roots in shallow water. When we go further inland here, among these dead leaves on the bottom and sometimes in the trees, we can find these little mangrove crabs. And if you zoom in, you can get a better look at them. They have these special adaptations on their claws, which are like little pinpricks growing out of the back of their hand. So instead of pinching on to climb the tree, they'll actually kind of just stick it in like nails and use those to walk up. Now these guys are helpful because they help decompose all the leaf litter around here. So they'll chop it up, sometimes pull it underground, and they help keep everything decomposed. So these are an important part of the ecosystem here because they help keep the stuff clean, they help break down the leaf litter. and they grow in mangroves. The mangroves provide them with the house, and these crabs provide the mangroves with nutrients, and they also aerate the soil. So it's sort of a symbiotic relationship these guys have with the mangroves. What I'm sitting in right now is a huge fiddler crab nest. If you take a look at the ground right here, you'll see all these little holes in the ground, and this is what the fiddler crab lives in. They dig these burrows and they'll go down into the sand to hide from predators. And all these little balls of sand covering this area is actually how the fiddler crab eats. What they do is they pull the sand up with their claw and put it in their mouth, and they filter little microorganisms or algae from the sand, eat that, and spit the sand back out in these little balls. And I have two Atlantic sand fiddler crabs here, and if you zoom in, you'll be able to see them. They're actually gender dimorphic, which means that the male and female of the same species look a lot different. Now you'll see this one has a really huge claw, and this one has two tiny ones. And the reason for this is because the males use these big claws for waving to attract a mate, and they'll also fight other male crabs with this claw. And this little female, it doesn't need to do any mating dances or fight, so she has the easy life, and she'll use these two small ones to put food in her mouth. This male also has a little smaller claw on the side, which he'll use. He's not as effective to eat food because he only has one small claw to put food in his mouth instead of two. Sometimes at nighttime, the male fiddler crab in his burrow, he'll take this huge claw and knock it. He'll make a pounding sound, and they probably use this to attract mates. Now, the fiddler crab is a vital part of this ecosystem because it keeps the beach clean by taking off any dead fish or some kind of dead insect off the sand, and also cleans the sand itself. Also, by digging their burrows, they help aerate the soil, which is good for the plants, and it also prevents too much bacteria from building up in the soil. They're pretty colorful too. They're way more colorful than the mud fiddler, which lives a little bit more inland. You can see on this male, they have these purple, yellow, and red patterns, so they're actually quite interesting to look at. And each single crab is going to have a different pattern on its back. Some will be more red, some will be more purple, and some will be completely gray. So it's kind of interesting to see what kind of colors they come in.